without women as the laborers, and without women as consumers, the fashion industry, as we know it today, would not exist. And so often our contributions are overlooked and or are diminished. You think about the way that women have always sewn and created apparel, and then when that became a multi-billion-dollar business and has since morphed into a multi-billion-dollar business, all of a sudden women were not essential to the story, right? The same thing has happened we've seen that happen with the food industry. So we're doing all the cooking in the home, but suddenly when it becomes a chef or a restaurateur, that becomes, oh, those are men who, they take that role, they can do that role. So it's been true of women, and I, like April, am really encouraged to see more women taking leadership roles, because we've always had roles, but we're talking about taking leadership roles and reaping more of the benefits from this industry. It has certainly improved, but we have a very long way to go. I was with someone today, I don't remember exactly who, not important, but the point is I was talking about this event tonight, and I mentioned April, and I said, and this woman, she's a trailblazer, and she came along at a time when there were very few women taking a leadership role or being lifted up as women were helping to create the whole hip-hop scene. And so, they were fascinated, like, oh, really? Yeah, you're gonna know.
Hi, everyone. So I just want to start off by letting you know that this book, you say 1910, and from that moment, that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for the women in the conversation. The women that labor, because I think we forget, like you said, women created this industry. And there are so many women, all backgrounds, all diversity, that sort of lives in the conversation from the beginning of this industry being developed. And I think we forget so much that, the women aren't running the countries. The women aren't the ones, pulling, like, the business. They weren't there. They weren't in that part, but they were definitely always in the picture. So I think for me, it's important that we appreciate and don't appreciate the labor force that is. Yeah.
Hello. I will come from this side of sustainability since that's the business that I'm into right now. And I feel like women are the ones that are leading the voices of sustainability, and it started with the late Vivian Westwood, Michelle Prada. We have Tracy Reed, and we have Thelma McCartney. Those are like the whole, because now no one talks about sustainability, no one talks about what the fashion is doing to the environment. And it's so great to have like the younger generation also that is also working on it, especially from Africa. People like Ugo from Nigeria, and from Duro from South Africa. So they're leading the voices of sustainability, which is really great.
So I have a question. I'm sorry to talk around the book. So fashion influences continue to evolve, creating an ongoing conversation about the impact that it has over time. Black in Fashion highlights many important women who have influenced the fashion industry throughout WWD's 100 plus years of documentary reporting. Some of them include Josephine Baker, Lena Horne, Shirley Chisholm, Catherine Dunham, Bertha Kitt, models like Ella Chen, Naomi Sim. The list is like forever. Norma Jean Gordon, well as by Hampton, who's sitting right here in the front row. And there's so many people, you know, so excited about doing this book, and just discovering people like, or women like Nathan, who trailblazed the way for many black designers to even have them in this industry. So, that made women. So have any of these women's names influenced your journey? If so, why? How? Why?
I'm sorry, I'll say all, you know, absolutely all. Whether it was their spirit, their attitude, their style, their fearlessness, them being courageous enough to step out and meet their chest and say, I'm first. Trendsetters, trailblazers, you know, Shirley Chisholm lives in my heart. Shirley Chisholm grew up in Brooklyn, and she was one of the first really strong women that made an impression on me in my life to be like, wow, like in so many ways. I'm not just talking about those classics, you know. So, you know, I could go on and on from Josephine Baker on and so many, you know. Mama, I want to sing, and it's just all my all of that fearlessness I benefit from because it lives in me because of that.
Thank you. Yes, I find that I look around me, to the right of me, to the left of me, I look in the history books, I see people, you know, whether we're looking on social media, looking on television, I see all these inspiring women, and I'm inspired by them for those who have come ahead of me and laid the groundwork. I'm also inspired by those who are coming after me in terms of age and profession, and it's really exciting. I think we should deliberately draw strength and power and fuel and energy from women around us. We are at a time we should not take it for granted, because we are at a time right now in the country where women are being taken back, women are being diminished, and I don't want to over-exaggerate it in any way. There are a lot of things that we benefit from right now as women that we take for granted, and it's easy to take those things for granted. And I think it's very important that we understand that and be intentional about saying, we are moving forward. We are going to take more. We are going to take up more space. We are going to demand, whether you do it with a spear or you do it with some honey and a little to your voice, but we are going to make the world better. Because in taking up our own space, we are making the world better for everyone, males and females, for all our kids. And I think it's important to have that stance and to also educate ourselves. What I find is, both as a woman and as a Black person, is we made incredible strides, right? I mean, so much has happened. I think we as a human race are more moral, generally speaking, than we were before, and that moral evolution is just as important as our material evolution. And I think we should educate ourselves, about, even though we are in a room, for instance, like this, and look at all these beautiful, powerful, accomplished, supportive women in this room and on this panel, but when you look at the data, there are a lot of things that need to happen that are not happening. You know, there are four, I just want to give one example. For instance, all of you in here know of entrepreneurs who are female. And the numbers are staggering. And Black women and Latina women have some of the highest rates of business formation right now. And then women across the board, and then also women who are over 50. But when you compare those numbers to what men have, right? It's the same thing with DEI, and you see how they were coming for us, but all of a sudden they're coming for a white woman who's on the Supreme Court. And we sit at the intersection, and we have, the reason it's important to educate ourselves is we have so little. And I don't mean that from a Black point of view, but compared to the men, there is so little. There are people who come after Higgins, but it's not that many. It's not that many. How many women are successful theater producers? How many women and Black women are able to support financially, be an investor in a fashion company, whereas there are gazillion men? So I don't want to start to lecture, but
I mean, to your point, I'm gonna jump off that boat, but just to piggyback on what you said, I saw Tracy's in Detroit. There's a school called Pensacola College in Detroit, and I was honored because they named the apparel studio the April Walker Apparel Studio. It's doing amazing work in apparel, footwear, culinary, everything. But the point is, Tracy and I were there, and someone pointed out, you know, two Black female designers that are still standing and legacy brands. 2027 will make 40 years that I still struggle. I'm just putting it on the table for you. I am here more for you because it's a thankless job. I love what I do. That's the part, right? I love what I do. I get to be creative and sit with all these amazing women and exchange ideas and compete. And that is therapy for me. But it is disheartening when you look at the numbers. And a lot of why I do it is so young people will keep doing it, that come after me and say, you know what, there is a different route. I don't have to necessarily take another stand. I can be independent. But I do think, to Constance's point, we have to be intentional. Community is everything. So spend money in the communities of these independent designers that need the support as well. I'm not saying spend it all, but spend some of it.
I'm echoing back on what April and Constance said. Yes, we are going through a very interesting period of our lives, being a woman. And me being a designer, I've been designing for over 30 years. And I would say that, yes, it's been a big struggle up and down, but I do it because I love what I do. I do it because I feel like, that's me. But going back to our original question, I would say all the ladies were a big inspiration to me because the fact that they have the courage to be able to dress themselves in a way that reflects their heritage at the time where it was very difficult to, and which could impact their jobs. For me, that is a huge inspiration. The fact that they were able to be authentic, inspires me to be authentic, and which goes for everyone and the people coming after us to be authentic about themselves, which reflects in whatever way they do. And secondly, if I have to choose a designer, I would say Josephine Baker. And Josephine Baker, because the fact that she was able to ingenious to invent the skirt, the banana skirt that she was wearing at that time in the 20s, and be able to make it a powerful tool for her. I think that's genius.
My favorite of them was Eartha Kitt. And she, of course, wore Leonie Ma, the animal, the leopard. She was the cat lady. And animal prints are sold every year in this society, especially in American department stores. And how many women came in tonight with animal So we influenced fashion throughout time. And we were also the seamstresses of the wealthy at that time. And I just think that we have always been there. We love fashion. Our history, our lifestyle has made us dress up. So we wear hats, we wear gloves, we wear curls. We have so much those curls. And I just think that we have always influenced and fashion throughout life, because what is fashion but clothes? Ultimately. And everyone needs clothes.
I'd like to add to that. When throughout the book, purchase the book, there are so many interesting sort of facts about each one of these people and many more, inclusively for Josephine, because Josephine, as many of us probably don't know, how influential she was on fashion, having a hosiery company named after her. Doing all these things first and telling the reader of WWD, no, you don't understand. Me, I did everything first. A ponytail, that thing you call a ponytail, I did that first. And then there's Catherine Dunham, who I think you don't see the influence so huge because she was on the stage, right? She was a dancer, and I think that her, the sheer idea that she brought Caribbean, African influences to the stage, and then fashion would turn around and say, wait a minute, oh, this is the next inspiration. So I think that when you're looking, or when I'm doing the research, takes on, it could have been, oh, just this, but there's so much to understand about how the influence, we look at Josephine, but then the entire 11th century, we can see Rihanna coming right in behind her. And I think those are the things that sort of make, and so you can see how fluid that influence becomes over time.
Agreed. I also would like to add the folks like Tonio, who are the documentarians and are the witness bearers for what's being done in fashion, for our culture. But since we're talking about style, let's broaden it a little bit, think style, who are, and I think about the forerunners, like when you were making that list of designers, Tonia, and then I thought about Mrs. Johnson, Eunice Johnson, and what she did for style, what she did for the whole industry. I mean, picture it, she didn't invent it, but she raised it to the level where it became a phenomenon, which was the Ebony Fashion Fair. Imagine going around the country putting on these incredible fashion shows featuring the fashions of leading designers as well as Black designers of the day, giving work and space and a platform to some of the most beautiful women in the world who happen to be Black, and allowed a place for the black communities to come together to, okay, we're gonna go see the Ebony Fashion Fair, right? And then point number 4 or 5, I was accounting, but most of these were for charity. It was to help the black, pardon me? Yes, yes, it was phenomenal, and I remember Bill Cunningham talking about, he had pictures of Mrs. Johnson in Europe, in Paris in particular, and she was welcomed at all the top houses of the time because she was buying, granted she was looking for one-ofs, she was looking for couture pieces, she was looking for cast-offs, but we're talking about of the top echelon, and she was paid with cold, hard cash. So they were happy to see Mrs. Johnson when she showed up. And so you think about all the levels that she was taking, and one more point not to be overlooked. She was taking these fashions, which are helping the whole fashion industry, into communities which otherwise would not have been exposed, regardless of color, would not have been exposed firsthand to these clothes. Veronica, you were there.
Yes, I was there. Mrs. Johnson I met in Milan, and she wanted to know who I was. Because, of course, she probably was the only black person at the fashion collections. And I met her also. I was with Audrey Smalls, who you all may know as our fashion diva of the century.
Border as well. I mean, she was making it.
Right. Yes. And Mrs. Johnson, I feel, with her passion for what she did, she elevated the industry, because who else was coming to America with European fashion? You couldn't even find it in department stores at that time. And in our communities, we were exposed where in a lot of other communities, they had no idea what was going on in fashion. So we have been exposed to European fashion for many, many years. And I love Mrs. Johnson, and I thank her for that.
So I'm going to interrupt you because while we're in the retail space.
Okay.
So Veronica Jones, you may not know all about her, witnessed a crucial period of growth in fashion retail. So given the ongoing changes, how vital do you believe retail is for young readers today? Because things are different, very different. Now we're going to get Hong here in New York.
Well, they definitely are different, especially since I've learned that Abraham and Strauss department store, which some of you may know of and others may not, because more recently it was Macy's on Fulton Street. And Macy's is now closing at that Fulton Street location. But A&S, it's worth a trip from anywhere to shop at A&S. Was a federated department store, as is Bloomingdale's. And they all had executive training programs. And I happened to be on one of them. And that was life-changing. They changed me. I was a quiet, shy person. I wanted to speak up. I had a boss who heard me talking and pleading with the manufacturer to get the delivery in on time. And she said, "Can you yell?" And I looked at her, I said, "Yell?" She said, "Yes, let me hear you." And she had me yelling in our office, which was right behind the ceiling. But she said, "Sometimes it's wonderful to be nice to me, but you have to learn to yell at them." You know, she said, "They have to get that delivery in on time for that ad that we're running on Sunday in the Times." And she had a picture of a very handsome man on her wall next to her desk. So after she yelled at all of these manufacturers, she would look at him and say, Shame they're all not like you are.
Do you feel that the role that you took on as an entrepreneur, how does that shape
Today,
what is retail like for today's generation? How does a young designer really see that as an opportunity? So much is different, you know?
it is. I used to say in the 80s that the demise of the department store was happening. And it has happened far greater than I ever imagined.
Faster.
And,
Much
no,
faster.
not faster, because it started in the 80s, right? But it's just fast.
Now it feels like
And now it's very different because life is changing, the demographics have changed in a lot of areas where stores are closing. You know, Macy's had 800 stores because they bought federated department stores for Macy's. And consequently, they changed the name to Macy's because it's the greatest store in the world. You know, everyone knows Macy's. Plus the Thanksgiving parade made them worldwide go-to in New York. But those jobs that I had don't exist in the way that they did. Technology has changed a lot, but it's always needed, especially in major stores and retail in particular. But we do everything differently. I was in a mall last week, Riverside Mall in New Jersey, and there was no one, and that's a high-end luxury mall, and there was no one in that mall. Really, I went to get my nails done, 2 women were in a huge space, and they were busy, so they couldn't take us. We were in Bloomingdale's, we were in Saks. There were hardly any customers in those stores. I don't know how they were going to survive with that type of inventory that they all have. And Max Mara was there, Ferragamo was there, and no one was in those stores. So it's a new day, a new way.
I'd like to, at some point, I had digressed and gone down the road with Mrs. Johnson, but it was very important. But I also wanted to bring attention to the media also as creators, in addition to being the reporters.
you're ahead of the question. You're gonna get ahead of that question.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna happily leave you to ask that question later, Tonya, because what I really wanted to say was, Veronica was speaking and talking about retail and so on, and Veronica, in addition to being trailblazing in the corporate world of department stores, also own your own boutiques, which was incredible. And I remember at showroom, and I remember interviewing Veronica for a story at the Williamsburg Daily. I don't know, many years ago. But I'll never forget what she said when she said, well, you know, to survive in this industry, what the retailers have to be is first, fast, and fabulous. Remember that? And that was amazing.
It was my mantra. You know, because we always had to fight. Who was going to get the Sunday Times double truck ad? And one person of color managed to make that happen, and that was Lester Hyde, who's in the book, when he came out with camouflage. Camouflage existed before, and it was sensational. And Lester was in Macy's and had a double truck ad in the Sunday Times.
So I'm gonna ask serious questions to two independents, April and Lola. And you guys are not so retail anymore, meaning you work with people started with their own boutique. Lola was starting in Safari, right, and other places. So I wonder how that is for you today.
Well, I would say it's been a bit challenging, and especially the business that I'm in nowadays is major demand. So it's mostly sell online, which means that, nothing is being made until it's being purchased, which is easy for what's happening now to minimize what goes to the landfill, especially because the problem of the landfill in Africa and in third countries. So that's what I do mostly. But I found out also that in order to be in touch with your customers, sometimes you have to do things like pop-up so that you get to know your customers. Making on demand, buying online, you don't really know who's buying from you, so you're not in contact with them. And I was raised by my grandmother who inspired me to be a designer. She was a market lady, and she met customers there, and I had that spirit in me. So I do enjoy taking my stuff to pop-ups to sell directly to my customers.
I think my journey is different just because when I started, like she said, I started with a custom atelier shop in Brooklyn called Fashion Effect, where we did everything from gowns to tuxedos all the way down to little sweatsuits, one-of-a-kind pieces. From there, walkaware started. And many people don't know that walkaware was actually national distribution. We sold to Macy's, A&S, we sold to Foot Locker's, Foot Action. A lot of those stores as well as the mom and pops, because at that time, the mom and pops are actually withdrawing business to the department stores. And you have to be very intentional about where you sold those department stores, because you didn't want to sell in key cities that, like New York, like at that time. You had to be very smart in your positioning. So we sold Dillard's, we sold certain stores, but we were selective, so we didn't upset the other stores. And then it was like distribution counters, so it was a dance. One neighborhood might get maybe 2 stores, because we wanted them to feel special. We were building these relationships, and the relationships weren't like sending somebody on our states. They were real relationships that we had to really cultivate and speak to each other. Constance was one of the first people that wrote about me in Williams Square Daily, and I will always love you for that, because at that time, hip-hop was not being represented, people were afraid of it, and it wasn't being taken seriously as an industry, even though we were bringing in dollars. So it meant a lot to get that kind of recognition, because it was exposure, and it really let other audiences see us. And probably because it was in WWD, they looked at it differently. So, you never know when we talk about that intentionality, what will happen. But back to the question, in the 90s, golden era, we sold in Japan and Europe, and here. And we are as well going to be trailblazers to open up distribution doors. That story doesn't get told enough. I think part of it is because I'm a woman, but I'm going to tell y'all that right now. Seriously, the game has changed so much, and you just have to be agile as an entrepreneur. So I work with a lot of younger people, and I pay attention, I teach, and I believe in reverse mentorship. So for me, it's about staying fluid with what's going on in the future, because if we're starting now, we're already late. Time is moving faster than it ever has before. It's moving exponentially, so you're thinking about your business, think about 10 years from now, how does that look? Because if you're thinking about an idea that works today, you're late. That's where we're at right now. So I'm thinking about, where we're going, but Lola, I can't say anything different. For me, it's pop-ups, it's direct to consumer, and it is collaborations. I'm really big on community. So, I'm back to, I have been in business now for a long time, and I think I make great things, but guess what? People want the staples that I made over and over. He has one on tonight. So I stop by to my customers and I'm giving them, I listen, and I'm giving the customers what they want. But we do collaborations, and when we do the collaborations, that's when I get to really like say, all right, we're gonna stretch this into something different. We have a drop coming with Reebok, and that's with their human rights, and you'll get to see storytelling, because I'm big on storytelling now. Because we need our voices we need our stories being told. And so I'm always looking at an experience now, and how can I share that experience and make money at the same time.
So in the book, Karen and I sort of see this conversation in WWD as paving the way. Not that they were doing anything magical, I would say, because they were reporting on an industry that they are focusing on. It's a trade publication, but the narrative that is championing the numerous challenges that people are having then and now, because they're many. And I would like to know, even from everyone here, what role does the press have in shaping the future of fashion, not just for Black designers, for all young designers coming into the field?
The press plays a very important role. We should be, if we weren't aware of it before, we should be now. Very important role in our lives, in our society, and very important role in fashion. The press reports what is happening. The press, and therefore, is a source of information for people in the industry and for people outside the industry. The press plays an important role in terms of elevating and having a brand have the ability to be known. If your consumer doesn't know you as a brand, that is the first line of offense, they can't purchase you. I mean, it's very elementary. And so the press is vital to spreading that story. And if you use the term media, that even hones in on it more, because the media includes social media, it includes legacy media, it includes all media. So there is word of mouth, and that's very important too. But these days, word of mouth also includes, some people call social media type of word of mouth too, because if it's something where it's a peer-to-peer, right? It's the same thing. So press those are some of the ways that it plays a very important role in the industry. And it's also, in that sense, it's a cultural driver. Fashion is very much an important part of the culture. More so, it's always been important, but more so than it was before. And the media are creators as well. They're creators of stories, creators of the fabric, if you will, sort of using a play on words, of our culture, alongside a designer, a stylist, a photographer, too.
And and also when there are many, Black and brown designers that are not what is fashion doing, because we know the conversation has its challenges and rears its head every so often, and we get there, and then are we still pushing forward? That's the, what is the media going to do about that? Right? Are your advice?
Well, my advice right now, for looking at right now and to the future, is from a Black and brown perspective, it is for the media to seize the moment. Because the same way we're experiencing this rollback and an attack on progress is one of the things that Veronica, April, Lola, everyone on this panel knew what one of the things we represent is we know what it was like before Black Lives Matter. And what it was like was not a pretty picture. It was, like April said, it was difficult to get coverage as a Black woman doing a hip-hop line. It was difficult for all the Black creators, male or female, to get coverage in the mainstream press about their work. And if you looked in those moments at the New York Times, you looked at the mainstream media, you looked at Vogue. I don't know if any of you have seen the series, the 90s on Vogue. I think it's on Apple. I haven't seen it. Some people have seen it. But it was funny because I read that there were some things layered into that story. Did you see it, Tony?
Yeah, I saw some of that.
Yeah, I would think you might see it or some of it. What I've been told is there was, and I read this too, that there were some things layered into that story so that the documentary would have some, shall we say, color in it. Because if you were telling the story of those covered in the 90s, there was no Black people in it to speak of. There certainly wasn't hip hop in the phase of Vogue. Were you featured in the people?
Well, I don't want you to drink the WWD Kool-Aid, but there is recovery.
There is coverage which in women's wear was revolutionary at the time. And swag.
All of you will cover in here, in Vogue. Yeah. But if you think about the trade, when you're thinking about when I look at the research that's happening in the conversation of creating this book, it's astounding that designers that like Lawrence Steele, many people probably do not know who Lawrence Steele is. He's the guy who brought culture per se to Moschino. And then product collection that everybody loves, the nylon collection. Well, he was there in the room. So those are the things that I think are profoundly important about how WWD was capturing in the moment, even hip hop, right? When there's Helena who's going to come behind me and make sure that women's voices are a part of that conversation.
But it was, yeah, but Lola, were you saying you were?
She was covered by
Covered by what?
By the way, I think Constance was the first one that covered me from New York Times too back then.
It was, yeah, there was, you being covered, and to your point, Tony, it was few and far between. We had to fight for that coverage.
Coverage is everything, but what really made the fashion business tick is sales. And what made designers great was that they sold, because it's all about the bottom line. And department stores elevated a few Black designers that happened to be original and authentic, like Willie Smith and my dear friend Stephen Burns. And Stephen was on a different level because Willie was about clothes for everyday people. So he was in the department stores in a big way, like April, who you see with her name. And Willie's working on it. Yes, definitely. But Stephen was on a different level, and he elevated to designer, couture, worldwide and well known. And the Battle of Versailles which wasn't a battle originally, but our generation called it the battle, right? But it was to save Versailles and restore Versailles in France.
But you have so many opportunities to see the growth in the pattern design in the press. That's what I'm saying. When you have surgical customers and you don't see him constantly covered, that's really so problem.
Right.
I think-
that correlates back to stores. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because we don't have the stores that we used to have. We don't have the advertising and marketing done in the way it used to be. So I met a young woman the other day who buys online, and I asked her, did she know Betsy Johnson, Norman Kamali, Theo Eugene? You know, I was just giving her a taste of what we knew. She was young, she may have never heard of them. But she said, oh, I don't look at brands. I just buy what I like. So it's very difficult in the future to tell, you really have to tell your story today.
Yeah.
And create that whole world of communication.
Thank you. I just was gonna say that goes back to that fluidity and being agile. Like, I think TikTok, I think Instagram, I hate to say it, but that is new media as well. Like, and I see a lot of designers making a lot of money because they're storytelling well, and they're showing you their process, and they're showing you packing in the process, the experience, taking that customer through the journey. They get loyal, and there's a certain loyalty that comes with it, and then using that as a marketing tool as well. So I just think that it's gotta come from multiple touch points right now, and you've gotta be active on all of them, not taking away from the press. The press will always be the press, and I think in that, I'm gonna just say one more time, we should be intentional about telling the stories of those that are being either dismissed or treated as they're invisible. But we also should use the tools that are there today and really, really amplify our own stories and not wait. Because if I waited, no one would know who I was.
And I think one of the things important way to get this make impact on music, if Tony, as you said, I think when you get to see, you saw the whole sweep in your research historically. And I have a certain sweep because it's my job as a journalist to go into multiple, hundreds of shows and see hundreds of collections. And it is encouraging to see, for instance, when Lola mentioned she's covered by Vogue, shared story, but it's a drop in the bucket and it's not equitable. And you don't necessarily realize that unless you're looking at the whole sweep of the plan.
I would say, before I started my sustainable learning, I got a lot of press, and I would say the press was really helping with myself. I actually had to take my collection to Paris to sell, and there I was able to get like all the department stores, but not in America. Mostly like they have Nikos all around the world. I was able to acquire that by myself, selling it in Paris. So I think the thing is for every designer, and from what April was saying, relating your messages to your customers or to your customer base, staying authentic to who you truly are, so that really that's what the customers are buying, is you as a designer, your story. That's what they're buying into. And I want to address a little bit of what Veronica was saying earlier about nowadays it's important that we sell, that we take our things out there to sell. Or someone buying online and buying just what they like. but it's not that simple. The problem now is that you have like all this fast fashion that basically covers all the designers and sell them at a very small fraction of the price. So obviously people are going to go online, they're not going to sell the designer decide, but they're buying people like Shein or Temu that is copying the designers and selling them at nothing. You know, so it's really not that simple. You know, yes, they shop online, but they're really shopping like copy street designers. You know, which is a challenge for designers like me, like, you know, April, you know, so.
Well, fashion definitely has changed, and yes, all of those companies have elevated themselves, you know, with price. I was shocked when I started looking online. I don't buy that much online. And I saw the price reports that are going on. And the industry in the past was really industry driven. It's not the public's industry, but the public somehow has made it their industry. And also, the European designers came to America because we do shop to much more than they ever did. When I used to travel to Paris, you saw women with same outfit on several times a week with accessorized differently. You know, but in America, we have enough clothes for a month to change our look. And we're very much into fashion. And America has made that happen in a big way. And everyone is born to shop. And they want to look fabulous. And we're all into fashion. You know? And it's very different. And it's even difficult for white designers to make it in America today because we don't have the stores. So everyone has to shift how they do business.
And it jump into joy.
Joy.
Yeah. So the book, fashion book looks at, 100 years, but through those decades, there is a lot of great moments
Yes.
to experience. So if you have seen the book and you look through it, there's a moment, I'm gonna put light in space, that I discovered. When I discovered, I knew who I was. And then I was like, oh, she's the one. Like, there's all these things happening. There's an article by Kalika, I'm not gonna know her last name, that's the editor. It's called Black Magic. And these opportunities, I think, throughout women's work daily coverage is how, we see Josephine, or we see Eartha Kitt, or we see, Lena Horne, and on, because through every moment, or every movement, there is this sort of idea that joy is coming, right? Like civil rights to Black Panther power, and then to Black beautiful. So I just want to maybe, I don't know where we are in time, but I wanted to sort of think about you guys thinking about that, for visibility and possibility, and the idea that for the book, that was the purpose, is to celebrate. At every turn, we were trying to celebrate and look at the moments as accomplished, more than beyond accomplishment, but understanding that for many people, what is documented has not really been exposed, right? Unless you're me and deep into this archive that way. So I'm going to ask all of you if there's a moment or a decade that resides in this joy moment for you. And if you can't say it. Can't say it.
I would say the moment of joy that really inspired me was in the early 90s when the Antwerp 8 came to America and they started the deconstruction era. And that was when I started designing because they really inspired me to do that, especially Makima Jeba. And I think what I like about that period so much is how they revolutionized fashion from turning this rework, basically. It's like what is happening is reworking old clothes and doing something really special with them that's different, that's unique, that's at the same time not intimidating.
She took the 90s. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say the 70s and 80s probably for me, because now I'm thinking about how I was inspired in fashion. A lot of it was around community and culture. I started out very early on. My father was a big part of the East. If you get, the East side of Brooklyn and the South Side, and those were schools I went to, and the African Street Festival came out of there and all of that. So a lot of musicians, Sunrise, Roy Ayers, etc. So all those concerts, I would be that little jazz baby, because my father was in the jazz industry. So jazz musicians back then, they dressed a certain way, and it was different, and there was a lot of just vibrancy in that spirit, right? And then going into the 80s now we're going into my spirit of rebellion, living in Brooklyn, and just seeing so many different things from, you gotta think in the 70s, we dealt with the Vietnam War, we dealt with Nixon, we had Shirley Chisholm coming up. This was Brooklyn for me, but there was this defiance, so there was a struggle with moving into the 80s with the Reagan era, and guess what came out of that? The spirit of entrepreneurship, the spirit of hip-hop being commercialized and saying we're not going to take it anymore, the music being amplified, and then the uniforms of defiance, of expressing ourselves in the way we wanted to say, this is how we dress, we're not doing it like you, if we're going to turn a new page, there's something different, and if you don't get it, you don't have to. And that was magic for me and has changed my life, so I would go with it.
Okay, I would say that, I don't know, I can't pick one thing. And I just love what April just said, because can you tell us something, April? Like, is joy coming in the morning?
It's coming.
Joy is here. And I like every day. It's just living life and celebrating life, because it's a yin and yang world. And I have to say,
Well, we just want to please stand up. Patty Carpenter, can you please stand up for the movement?
So thank you so much to everyone, our extraordinary moderator and panelists, and I love the co-facilitation that you all had. It was really great. This was such an enlightening discussion, and as Tonya said, please buy a book. We have books available here. We will have a book signing over here to my left. Of course, they'll pop up to my right, and then in the rear, we will have snacks and drinks. We're grateful to WWD, Drop of Sunshine, who provided the wine, Fairway, who provided some snacks, as well as Laura, extra special. So what I want to do, I said to you earlier that our donors and supporters are who make this whole thing go, right? Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to talk about all of the facets that women are really who make this industry go. It's wonderful. Women, not just with the ideas, but actually producing it. At Custom Collaborative, we're very focused on sustainable fashion. One of the tenets of sustainability is fair wages for workers. The people who actually sew our clothes, many of us know, most of us know, that more than 99% of the clothes that we wear are made by people, not just machines. There's not some robots who are making, it's actually women. Women of the global south, meaning black and brown women. And we have a sign here showing that there are garment workers, thousands of garment workers in the United States who work for less than $3 an hour. Right? And so when we are buying the things, don't think just about, oh, Temu and Shein, I'm not gonna buy them because they have lead and other banned chemicals in their clothes and I don't want them on my skin, but also that they are exploiting people. Right. And so I'm so glad that you all are here. You got to learn about these fine clothes that these ladies have made and promoted and invested their lives work in writing about. And I just want to thank all of you for being here, invite you to enjoy yourselves with some refreshments and close the night. Thank you so much.